get weird. Who cares? What's up, everybody? Mark with Vocalist Academy here, and today we're doing a song just because I want to. Just because I frickin' want to. That's what it is. Today, we're going to be talking about Death Atlas, my favorite cattle decapitation song. For a long time, it was Kingdom of Tyrants. But this one just takes the cake for me. As many of you know, Travis Ryan is probably one of my favorite metal vocalists in existence. I just love the sound of his voice. I love the music. I love everything. We're going to talk about it pretty in depth. Now, we're going to talk a little bit at the beginning today, but bear with me. Now, if you're new to the channel, again, my name is Mark. I'm the vocalist in 3 bands, Kardashev, Never Breath, and Viremia, and also I am a vocal coach specializing in stuff like this. We take the reaction format, we break it down, we have a lot of fun. It's a great time, and we try to get educational. Sometimes, we explore the techniques that they're doing, or if I'm not sure, I take my best guess, and we see what we get. We also have a Patreon. If you enjoy the videos, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Really helps the algorithm, really helps the channel grow. I've been seeing the channel grow, and I love that. And again, like I said, we do have a Patreon, so if you want to help us try to make 2 videos a week, maybe even a little bit more, feel free to check it out. We have an awesome Discord with a lot of cool people. We're starting to do community events, and it's a lot of fun. So check it out. Say hi if you're so inclined. Now, we're going to do this video a little bit differently today. I'm going to do something that I've never done before, and I probably am never going to do again, and that is that I'm going to give you the timestamp for when this reaction video starts, or when the actual reaction portion of the video starts. And the reason is that I know not everybody is here for technique. Now, technically, I've heard this song before. It's one of my favorite songs by them, like I said, so it's more of an analysis than a reaction, but like, I can't listen to this song without jamming out, so there's that. But the reason I'm going to give you this timestamp is because I want to set a precedent. I want to do this video a little bit differently. So here's when the actual reaction portion starts, but if you're an aspiring vocalist, if you're somebody who really wants to find your voice, stick around for a little bit. Just bear with me. Anyways, here's when the reaction section starts. Head to that timestamp to get to the fun stuff. But for my fellow vocalists and my fellow aspiring vocalists out there, I want to talk about something. So Travis Ryan's a really interesting dude, and he's been on record on some interviews talking about some frustrations with the current vocal landscape. Feeling like the standardization of metal vocals, the fact that it's becoming something that has like a common phrase work now. Like we all say, guttural and tunnel throat and like this, that, and the other, and we know what we're talking about. And he's kind of had some frustration with that in the past. And, as a vocal coach, someone who teaches this stuff, my response to this is that I totally agree. I totally agree. I think it's really important that we have a common language that we speak. And I also think that it's really important that we really hone in on safety, right? Safety is imperative. It is imperative that we know how to use our system properly. But I have noticed, since July, going into this vocal coaching thing more full time, that sometimes our usage of these terms can seem to limit creativity. Now, here's what I mean by this. If you had a cookbook in your kitchen, right? That cookbook is a list of stuff you can make, and there are clear guidances on how to do it. But that does not mean those are the only things you're allowed to make. It doesn't mean it's the only thing you can make. As long as you have a knowledge of the basic ingredients, you know what garlic tastes like, you know not to cook it too hot so it doesn't get bitter, you understand the different types of oils and their smoke points, you understand the flavor of different things and how they'll behave in different temperatures. As long as you have that basic cooking knowledge, you're going to come up with some of your best recipes by just experimenting and getting weird and kind of breaking away from these common terms such as like tunnel throat and things. And tunnel throat is even such a weird one too, because it's like, what is a tunnel throat? Is it only this? Or is it this? Or is it this? I've seen people make the sounds with all sorts of crazy positions, right? So as we talk about this video, I don't want us to think of it as like, here's how to copy Travis Ryan's voice, because he's really coined a sound for himself and anybody's going to know. Like, you know what I mean? You start doing this in your band and people are going to be like, oh, so they really listen to a lot of cattle decapitation. Okay, I see. Cool. But really, I encourage you. I have found some of my highest vocal I can do. I found just from experimenting and being like, okay, here's the stuff I know about. Let me get weird. So I encourage you, if you're new, focus on safety first, but feel free to experiment. You have a voice just like all of us do. You're welcome to play with it. Just again, make sure you're safe. And if you're a tried and true vocalist, maybe break the mold a little bit. Maybe, you know, say, okay, so I've got my guttural, my mid, my high, I can false chord and I can fry. What else is there? What weird things can I put together? So that being said, let's go ahead and let's get into it. But keep that in mind. Feel free to experiment. Feel free to just get weird and have fun. And as long as you're being safe, make strange voices. I learned to compress my vocals, my screams, which compression is its own term that can be kind of tricky, right? But I learned how to tighten up and manage the airflow of my screams by talking like a Muppet. Really, I did. And we're going to talk about that in this video. So let's go ahead. I've been jabbering along for too long. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk about Death Atlas and this awesome short film called The Unerasable Past. Cattle Decapitation is amazing. Travis Ryan is amazing. Let's go.
It was incredible mold on a rock that got to think. It's amazing.
Here it comes. Oh my God, here it comes. Okay, so kind of a long intro because in the actual track, that singing at the beginning is later on in the song. It just the track like on Spotify or whatever starts with those crazy blast beats, which by the way I love. Ugh. I love when you have like that black metal, like that driving sound with major chord progressions behind it, like major notes behind it, like just kill me. I'm in love with it. So a couple things we can talk about here. So one thing that's really cool is the singing, right? We have this sound time, but it's a little lower. Time after day. As many times as I've listened to the song, you'd think I'd have the lyrics memorized, but I just don't. When I'm doing that, and when people do that, there's a tendency, or I should say, when we do that, we don't need to really do any crazy laryngeal movement. In case you're curious, because sometimes people don't know, your larynx is the big structure in your neck that houses your vocal folds as well as your false chords, right? And you can feel it. It's this big chunk of cartilage. A lot of times when people try to get these lower sounds, they'll take their larynx and push it down, and we get sort of like a "no, this is Patrick," right? And that can create kind of like the false deep voice, time after time, right? But we can actually get a better and more manageable sound, which is what Travis is doing here. We can get a better and more manageable sound by simply relaxing our neck and sort of lowering the back of our tongue, not pulling it down our throat, but just lowering it. For example, if you say e or ah, your tongue raises, and if you say ah as in father, time, and then we let our voice resonate in our mouth, right? We let our voice resonate in our mouth versus our throat, time after time after time. We get these really cool rich tones. He kind of reminds me of the guy from Tears for Fears, but a little lower. hopefully that's a good thing to say. I love Tears for Fears, but anyways, kind of just has a little bit of that vibe, right? So first and foremost, if you're trying to think of different ways to make your voice sound warmer, deeper, richer, play around with the back of the tongue, lower it, flatten it out. Versus right? And you'll notice the vowel changes. It's a big part of the singing game, right? Is playing around with and knowing how to control vowels. Now let's talk about the screams that we have here. One thing I love about Travis Ryan's screams is that they have this really controlled clacky sound. Now, when we're first learning false chord vocals, generally we want to avoid that, right? And that's because tightening up that airflow and managing it takes laryngeal muscular strength. It takes strength, right? And essentially starting there can be difficult to control, essentially since we're holding the vocal folds open and holding the false chords together. And essentially when we do like a full false chord scream, we're also getting distortion from like the arytenoid cartilages, the soft palate, the postpharyngeal wall. With this, it's much more isolated. Without a laryngoscopy, I couldn't tell you exactly what's rattling around, but false chords and arytenoid cartilages are generally a safe bet to say. Now, I learned how to do similar. I don't sound just like him, but I learned how to do this. And I'm going to go into it, but I do not want you to try this if you're starting out new. Like you're just going to feel sore because your muscles aren't ready. But like when we have like our normal relaxed false chord, yeah, wah, right? That's a false chord sound and it sounds cool. But oftentimes when people are going for more like deathcore and death metal, that's not quite enough. Well, one thing we can do is we can learn how to squeeze the back of the tongue and make a laryngeal shift to take that sound and right. And if I take that sound and I talk through it, I kind of sound like Kermit the Frog here. You didn't think we'd be talking about Muppets, did you? But we are. Now, you don't have to have a perfect Kermit the Frog impression. This is tricky, by the way. This is tough, so don't be upset if you can't get it right away. And there are other ways to compress as well, or to get the feeling for compressing. But essentially what we're doing is we are getting a pharyngeal squeeze. We're squeezing the muscles of the pharynx. Right? And we're introducing a slight raising of the larynx. Yay! Alas, and that kind of gives us that clackier, poppier sound. Not pop as in music, but literal like pop, right? So something to think about there. If you can't do a simple grunt, without the sound of your vocal folds involved and without it feeling up high in the mouth on the soft palate, don't even mess with this. But once you're there, kind of gives you that sound. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. Now, that's a really sick section with a lot of stuff to talk about as well. One of the things that I think kind of shows with, Travis Ryan has said a lot of times that he kind of just learned vocals on stage, which can be risky business if you don't have kind of a natural inclination to using your voice. Some people are just, some people are more predispositioned to being able to control those muscles. So while I necessarily wouldn't suggest starting to learn your vocals on stage, I think that stage is a great playground to play around with them. But one of the things that you can kind of hear and you can tell is how much he manipulates the lips and the tongue and like accentuates the teeth to show the timbre. Like if I take a sound here, or to brighten the timbre, I'm sorry, if I take a sound, that's not hard to do. Imagine how crazy it would sound if I did it with high vocals, right? And that's what he does. You'll notice that I'm kind of articulating with a really small embouchure, like a really small, really tiny mouth. Right? So he does a lot of that and it sounds so cool. He'll add syllables to words that I just love that. One thing I want to talk about is he does these extremely high vocals. Now, I'll talk to you about how I achieve them. There are different ways to do this, so please don't watch this and be like, oh, this is the end-all be-all. Like, there are so many approaches to metal vocals, right? This is not the only way. But for me, I started with kind of this, like that kind of vocal, and I was like, I need to take it higher. I need to take it higher. And I actually learned to do this tracking for Never Breath at the end of the last song on the album. I don't remember what it's called. Anyway, I was like, what if I just breathe differently? What if I take the and change it to more of a cat, like, right? What if I do that? Now, I had taken a lot of time to relax the neck muscles, right? When we have a tendency to go higher, people tend to kind of do what I call the Cardassian neck for my Star Trek fans among us. Right? That's going to cause you a bad time. So relaxing the throat is imperative, but I took my high and it sounds pretty cool. Well, I mean, not everybody's going to like it, but I think it sounds pretty cool. And if you combine that with these like crazy positions, it sounds pretty neat. So he does that. I'm gonna be real. He does it better than me. Like, just why lie? It's just true. And I just love the way he articulates and chews on his sounds. That's another thing you can play around with. Play around with tongue shapes. Don't feel embarrassed to look weird. There's this video of a guy on the internet. I can't remember what it is, but he does like these crazy vocals. He sticks this. Well, Travis does this as well, but like they stick their tongue out. Like, just get weird. Who cares? Let's keep going. That's a great place to talk about low vocals. So oftentimes, when I'm working with people, they'll say, I want to get my lows lower, but I don't know how. And again, what they'll end up doing is they'll start taking that larynx and shoving it down, really pressing it down into their throat, like down. It's like almost like they're trying to get their larynx down into, like, I can't forget what this is called. Or I can't remember what this is called, but it's the notch in your collarbone, the supra something notch. I don't remember. If you know, put it in the comments below. But we really don't have to do a lot of that. Really, we have so many structures above the larynx that can help us get lower. And we can also manage airflow as well, right? So if I take like just a simple compressed false chord vocal, right? I'm gonna sacrifice a little volume. I'm gonna say, okay, because volume is not the end all be all of metal vocals, right? Volume's great, but we got mics, we got PAs. You're right. I'm going to take that. I'm going to sacrifice some volume, and I'm going to switch to a very resonant, forwardly resonant sound. When we're singing, if we're singing clean and we're in our chest voice, our goal is to kind of resonate our voice in our mouth as much as we can, right? And that kind of gives us that deep, warm sound. We can take that same concept and we can do it with our low vocals. Sounds terrible if you do it with a clean singing voice. Right? I am extending a section of the lower part of my jaw. There's a bone there called the hyoid bone. I am extending that, but I'm not pulling my larynx down into my neck. Another thing we can think about is we can think about using secondary resonance chambers. And I'm going to throw a shout out to Riley McShane from Elegion. He is the one who introduced me to that term. He's like, hey, this is what I call it. And I was like, that's genius. But creating secondary resonance pockets in the mouth, right? Our goal is to extend and maximize the space of our mouth. There are a couple ways we can do that. One, extend the lips. Like if I say an ooh, listen to how much that changed just by puckering up. Now I'm going to curl my tongue. Now I'm going to drop my jaw. Right there. Take away some of the volume, lower the airflow so we get a slower rate of rattle. Slower rattle means lower frequency, right? It's like a guitar string. The faster it's vibrating, the higher pitch you're going to get, right? And there you go, and you have it. Now, it can get a little itchy, it can get a little scratchy, so make sure your resonance placement is on point. But then you just play around with vowels. And it's a lot of fun. You can have a great time. It also doesn't take a lot of work. Once you nail it, it doesn't take a lot of work. Let's keep going, though, because this song is dope. Did y'all hear how he said graves? Yo, we got to hear that again. Graves. We took this world to our graves. Ugh. Graves. He like really pushes that through his nose. Graves. How did he do? Let me hear that again. That's sick. So we're about to get to kind of the outro. I want to talk a little bit about his like crazy goblin singing. It's weird, and I'll be real, I don't have a full handle on it. I've played around with it a little bit. I remember when I first heard it, they did like a behind the scenes tracking for Monolith of Inhumanity. Between Death Atlas and Monolith, it's hard to decide what my favorite album is. Monolith of Inhumanity is really good. Like, that is a solid album. And I saw it behind the scenes, and I honestly thought it was a joke. I was like, this has got to be a joke. And then I heard it in the album, and I was like, okay, this is awesome. This sounds awesome. I haven't spent a lot of time trying to understand it because I just really strongly feel that, like, this is kind of his thing. Whenever I approach it, what I do, if you play around with this, feel free to talk about how you do it in the comments below. But again, like... If you put this on your album, people will be like, oh yeah, this is the band that sounds like Cattle Decapitation, and I don't know if you want that. I wouldn't necessarily want that. But I kind of just take my high vocal. All right, so the DSLR cut out, so we'll start over. I was talking about Travis Ryan's singing, and I was talking about Travis Ryan's singing and how I don't have like a full handle on it because I really feel like this is Travis Ryan's thing. I feel like this is kind of what he's coined for himself. I'm not gonna, and even if I did figure it out, like I'm not gonna use it in Kardashev. Like I don't want people to be like, oh yeah, that band that sounds like Cattle Decap, right? Why would you want that? But when I do kind of just play around with it on rare occasion here, I just kind of take my high vocal. There's no fear for tomorrow. And I try to put like kind of a falsetto. There's no fear for tomorrow. Doesn't sound very good. I think it sounds like crap when I do it. But that's kind of how I feel maybe he's approaching it. Again, super interested to hear what your feedback is. But it's a weird sound. I love it. Never swam after. Y'all, that's goofy. I'm gonna stop doing that right now because I'm making a fool of myself. All right, let's get to the outro. Oh, it's too much fun. Mm. I would love to know the story of who that is singing at the outro. Voice is phenomenal. One thing I never noticed, I've seen this video a couple times. One thing I never noticed is that they bring in visual thematic elements from Monolith of Inhumanity and the Anthropocene. Oh, it's the album before Death Atlas, the Anthropocene. I can't remember, but Monolith of Humanity obviously has the monolith, right? And here there was a section with the monolith like crumbling, and then the Anthropocene. What is that album called? Good gosh, I'm an idiot. Anthropocene. Well, apparently I don't have any connection. Anyway, that album had a lot of artwork where there was like the Anthropocene extinction. That's what it was called. They had a lot of like, they had each of the band members with their stomachs open, like full of plastic, right? Just like full of plastic. And then we saw like these Pompeii figures that had like plastic, like kind of on the side. So really cool that they're tying together these thematic elements. But let's go ahead and wrap it up here because this might be our longest video we've ever done. I'm not sure, but again, I hold that safety is very, very important and that it is very important to learn safety. But I also think that there should be a lot of room for experimentation, for playing with funny voices, for getting weird, for making mistakes. You know, if you have vocal anatomy, which all of us do, even though, you know, some of us may have surgeries and things, you can do this kind of stuff, right? You can find ways to create awesome and amazing sounds. And that's really what pushes the boundaries and what pushes the genre. Not all of us doing the same guttural that everybody else is doing, although I use those gutturals too, right? My bass guttural, like that's pretty standard. I'll own it. But when we play around with voices and we try to get weird and maybe break the mold a little bit, that's what kind of pushes and causes the art form to transform and evolve. So don't be afraid. It's okay to do what you're comfortable with and to do the stuff that's standard. That's awesome. I won't disparage it because I do a lot of that, but also feel free to experiment. Again, if you're new to the channel, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe and hit the bell. Really helps with the algorithm. This channel is growing very rapidly. I'm really appreciative to all of you for doing that. And again, if you want to help us make more of these videos, if you want to show some extra support, we do have a Patreon. It is a lot of fun. We've got a growing community there of really positive people. So with that, I'm going to go listen to this whole album because it's just scratched the itch. But I thank you for hanging out with me today. It's meant a lot. It's been a lot of fun. Many thanks. Much love. I'm out.